material that's now used in bulletproof vests, racing gear, aircraft, spacecraft, helmets, and countless other engineering applications. And to think, it almost ended up in trash. The fibers emerged. At first, they didn't look particularly extraordinary. The fibers were unbelievably strong. What made Kevlar so special? Sometimes the biggest discoveries don't come from getting the expected answer. They come from
Hello everyone, this is Ruhi here and welcome to Cross Section. So the idea behind this channel is that every object around us has a story hidden beneath its surface. And most of the time, guess what? We never notice it. But seriously, every crack, every failure, and even every breakthrough has a reason waiting to just be discovered. So at Cross Section, we go beneath the surface, not just to understand what happened, but to uncover why it happened. Because every failure leaves behind a lesson, and every story has another layer waiting to be revealed. So let's get started.
Imagine spending weeks working on an experiment, only for it to produce something that looks completely wrong. The liquid is cloudy, it's unusually thin, and it's nothing like the solutions you're supposed to make. Most people would probably throw it away and start over. But what if that failed experiment turned out to be one of the greatest material discoveries of the 20th century? This is the story of Kevlar, a material that's now used in bulletproof vests, racing gear, aircraft, spacecraft, helmets, and countless other engineering applications. And to think, it almost ended up in the trash? Let's investigate. It's the early 1960s. Cars are becoming faster, roads are improving, and engineers are searching for ways to make vehicles more fuel efficient. Now, one obvious solution is to make them lighter. But there was a problem. Car tires relied on steel reinforcement. Steel is incredibly strong, but it's also heavy. At DuPont, chemist Stephanie Quilek was asked to help develop a new lightweight fiber that could someday replace steel in tires. She wasn't trying to invent body armor. She wasn't trying to create the world's strongest fiber. She was simply trying to solve a completely different engineering problem. One day, while making another experimental polymer solution, something unusual happened. Normally, these solutions were thick, clear, and almost syrup-like. But this one? This one was completely different. It looked cloudy, almost watery. And when she stirred it, it had an unusual, almost shimmering appearance. To most chemists, it looked like something had gone wrong. The obvious conclusion was simple. Throw it away, start again. But Stephanie Quilek hesitated. She had the feeling that this wasn't an ordinary failed experiment. So instead of discarding it, she decided to test it. The next step was to turn the liquid into fibers. And to do that, the solution had to pass through a device called a spinneret, which is simply a metal plate filled with hundreds of microscopic holes. Think of it like squeezing toothpaste through tiny openings to create long, continuous strands. But again, there was another problem. The technician operating the machine didn't want to use the solution. And for good reason. It looked contaminated. It was far thinner than normal polymer solutions. And everyone worried it might clog the expensive spinneret and damage the equipment. From their perspective, refusing to run the experiment was absolutely reasonable. But Stephanie insisted. She believed the strange solution deserved one chance. And finally, the solution was loaded into the machine. fibers emerged. At first, they didn't look particularly extraordinary. But then came the moment that changed everything. Stephanie picked up one of the fibers and tried to break it with her hands. It wouldn't break. She pulled harder. Still nothing. The fibers were unbelievably strong. And in that quiet moment inside the laboratory, she realized they weren't looking at a failed experiment anymore. They were looking at an entirely new material. So, what made Kevlar so special? Imagine pulling on a single sheet from a messy pile of paper. It slides out easily. But now, glue every sheet together perfectly. And pull one sheet, and you're forced to move the entire stack. You can't just pull out one sheet. Kevlar's molecules behave more like the second case. Its long polymer molecules naturally line up alongside one another, forming an incredibly organized structure. And instead of each molecule carrying the force alone, millions of aligned molecules work together. That's what gives Kevlar its remarkable tensile strength. Weight for weight, it can withstand far greater pulling forces than steel while being much lighter. First, nobody knew exactly what to do with this new material. It wasn't immediately turned into bulletproof vests, and in fact, it took several years before engineers fully realized what they had discovered. Eventually, Kevlar did find its way into the reinforcement of tires, where it had originally been intended. But then came helmets, protective gloves, body armor, aircraft components, spacecraft, fiber optic cable reinforcement, high performance racing equipment, and countless other applications where engineers needed something that was both incredibly strong and exceptionally lightweight. And today, millions of people rely on Kevlar without ever realizing the story behind it. The discovery of Kevlar changed more than just material science. It changed the way scientists think about unexpected results. Because the experiment didn't look successful and the solution didn't behave the way it was supposed to. Most people saw a mistake. Stephanie Quillex saw a question worth asking, and that question changed the world. The lesson wasn't that every failed experiment hides a revolutionary discovery. Most don't. But the greatest discoveries often begin with something unexpected, a result that doesn't fit, a measurement that doesn't make sense, and a material that behaves differently than anyone expected. The real breakthrough wasn't just Kevlar. It was the decision not to throw away something simply because it looked wrong. Because in science and engineering, sometimes the biggest discoveries don't come from getting the expected answer. They come from having the curiosity to investigate the unexpected one. And that brings us to the end of this story. Was there something about the story that maybe surprised you? Or is there another engineering mystery you've always wanted to know about? Whatever it is, I'd love to hear your thoughts and suggestions in the comment section below. And remember, if you're someone who loves to understand or is trying to figure out the hidden science behind engineering, don't forget to subscribe so that you don't miss out on the next episode of Cross Section. Looking forward to seeing you then.